Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of Think Business Live. Looking forward to talking to Patrick Colletti. Patrick, welcome. Looking forward to talking to you about your new book, Refounder, how transformational leaders take what's broken and make it better. Looking forward to talking to you about your experience also as the founder and now retired president of Net Health. But let's dive into your book, because I think, your book is talking about transformational leaders. And so let's talk about what the word transformation means today. It is, we're in such we're in such changing times. I recently found a video from 1994 with Katie Couric and Brian Gumbel, and talking about what is the internet. And they were talking about the internet, and you should watch it. It's hilarious. And Katie Couric's like, wait, now what's the internet? And they're asking their producers, and what does that @ sign mean? And how do you pronounce it? I mean, it's comical, especially how advanced they are now. Even everybody who's on that panel or on the show, how far we have come in 27 years. And one of the things I think that a lot of people don't think about is, it's just it's hard almost to process that 1980 to 2021 is as far apart as 1980 and 1939. And so if you're stuck in 1980, if you were stuck doing what you did in 1939, you would be out of business. If in 2021, you're still doing the same things as 1980, you're out of business. And so there's so much transformation. The reason I bring that up, there's so much transformation that has happened over all of that time. And so how do you define transformation, how we are today as we sit here live on December 7th, 2021, moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And I appreciate you hosting me here today. So I think it's an amazing time to be alive. It's an amazing time to witness the change that's occurring in the world. It's a cliche at this point to say the pandemic has taught us we're resilient, we can make it, we can change and adapt. And so I think the pandemic's given us lots of great examples of how we can transform as a society, ways we need to transform. But even just from a business perspective and an education perspective,
Yeah.
think of the way we have changed. And so it's definitely a great time to be alive. When I think about transformation, I think about it in a few basic spheres. So I think about in the corporate world, particularly, it's probably 80% of my focus. But I also think about it in the places that we live and play as well. And so I think about people in education. I think about people in healthcare. I think about city revitalization. And so when I speak about transformation and transformational leaders, it's a mindset. It's not necessarily a business growth recipe. It's really a mindset for how do we create growth? How do we challenge the status quo in really everything we touch?
Yeah. So how do we challenge the status quo? Not so much how do we challenge it, but how do we then execute to evolve from it? I think a lot of companies are struggling with that right now, right? What is the future? I mean, I got delivered yesterday Oculus 2. I don't know if you have it, but to me, I felt with everything going on with virtual reality and artificial intelligence and et cetera, et cetera, I need to be more in the know of VR. And it's unbelievable, right? And so how do you break the status quo? What are small things that every day that the people need to do every day, especially business owners?
Well, what our research found was that there's typically four personas in every successful refounding, right? So as I describe these, you'll probably see yourself or hear yourself in one of them. And I guess the first takeaway is that refounders do this, and it's a team sport. Rarely do you see a successful refounding occur just by the might of one person. And so it's really a team. So there's really four steps, and each of these steps requires a particular persona. And you may hear, or your listeners may hear themselves in one or two of these, and that's great. But typically, you're going to fall into one of the four. And so they're both sequential movements in terms of how you successfully refound something. And again, they're personas. So I'll start with the first one. The first thing that occurs in a refounding is that there's one person who is not afraid to take a sober look at a hard reality.
Yeah.
And when you think about corporate culture, whether it's a small enterprise or a multi-thousand person organization, there aren't a lot of people that are willing to be that canary in the coal mine. And so it takes a very special individual and perhaps a very special set of very unfortunate circumstances for one person or a group of people to say, I'm taking a sober look and this thing is broken. This hard reality is absolutely broken. A
Hmm.
lot of people like to go along with the status quo. So it's going to take that initial person who's got that skill set.
Yeah.
Well, then there's a second persona, and this person, once something has been identified as broken, this refounder selectively focuses and they determine this thing I describe as problem zero. It's not the only problem, but it is the specific problem that is holding the enterprise or the organism back from flourishing.
The
And so
bedrock
this,
of the bedrock problem.
yes. And so this refounder really is able to selectively focus. Another way to think of that is in the concept of essentialism. There are many important things to do, but right now there's only one.
Great
And
book.
so,
I just want to pull out, I'm assuming you're referencing the book Essentialism by
yes,
Greg, what is it? Greg McNown, Greg McNown.
McEwen, yes.
Yeah, McEwen, right. Great book. Okay, keep on going.
And so these refounders are, you think in terms, I don't want to box anybody in, but think about how an amazing program or project manager, somebody who's got a global product that they're leading or project that they're leading, they have the ability to segment and understand what really needs to be done now. And so that second group, again, once identifying what problem zero is, they selectively focus. Well, that third refounding step and that third persona type are refounders that are able to imagine audacious and bold new possibilities, even if they seem remote. And so, just for a moment, juxtapose this audacious dreamer with
Yeah.
the first persona of a person who's a very sober minded person who is able to look at hard realities. These are very different people. And then the fourth step is a refounder that springs to action, creating better realities for people, both those in their immediate community and those in the world at large. These are people who drive with vision and with passion that there's a purpose in our organization and we need to run towards that purpose.
Yeah. All right, good. How do people, let's talk about that for a second, because I think in order for people to run towards a purpose, there needs to be an understood vision from leadership, consistently articulated and messaged in a simple way where people can grab onto it. And so when do you find in companies and in people, how do you encourage that so people aren't running towards their own only towards their own individual purpose, but running with the purpose of the company as well in alignment?
Yeah, so I think of this in two ways, right? So if a refounder has a project that they're thinking about refounding, there's really three questions they ask. If you are an employee in an existing organization that maybe just went through a refounding or is on the precipice, there's similar questions, slight different twists. So the first question, quite simply, is it worth your time and energy?
Mhm.
And if you are struggling to make ends meet, well, anything may be worth your time and energy because you're trying to feed yourself. If you're not in that situation, time and energy takes a whole nother dynamic, right? You may recognize that it's you have a very high multiple on your time. The second thing is, do you have a team that you can trust? And so if these base layers are created, then you kind of move to the highest level of the self-actualization of the organization, which is the purpose and potential bigger than the problem? And so if the answer to all three of these questions is yes, don't cut bait, don't give up and go with it. And it does boil down as you move up the pyramid to, is there a bigger purpose that is making me interested enough to stay through whatever the pain may need to be that I have to endure? And so that's kind of the broadest. Now, not every organization and every individual is fortunate enough to be able to think about what their bigger purpose is. Some people are just grinding,
Yeah.
and typically those kind of organizations have high levels of attrition, grind through people. They're not very innovative, and they will be disrupted soon. And then they will inevitably need to go through their own refounder movement.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. And so when a company reads this book, when an individual reads this book, and they recognize, which archetype they are, how do you recommend they continue? What are the steps of moving forward and evolving?
Yeah, great question. So the most successful companies are going to develop a culture of refounders. And so think about, kind of the old plight, which was it's all about profit for the shareholders and that's it. As kind of time went on, we recognized that no, our employees are a big deal and they're important. And our stakeholders, our investors, our communities, right? The environment, the places that we live, work, and play, they play a big part in who we are and who we want to be as well. So I'd say the first step really is organizations have to create a culture where refounders flourish. And what does that
Yeah.
mean? Well, if you're going to challenge the status quo, that means that you have to have a culture that can withstand people challenging the status quo.
Yeah.
That means that people have to have great access to management and their ideas need to be taken seriously. It means that management needs to act on behalf of these ideas. And if you think an idea is bad, you need to be able to look somebody in the eyes and let them know this isn't the best idea for the company. You can't
Yeah.
just kind of hide from that or have like one of those idea boxes and then never respond to people. So the best organizations that I see are creating this base level with all new employees. And basically they're teaching a philosophy and a mindset of we want you to be a refounder. We want you to challenge the status quo. Here are the steps. Here's what we do. Sometimes that means we take a sober look at things. Sometimes that means we dream audaciously. But we want to develop and foster this kind of a mindset in our organization.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I think a lot of companies are subscribing to this. A lot of companies are behind the times on this. And in many companies, I see it as a business coach because I coach anything from solopreneurs to Fortune companies. There's still in many companies that layer of fear to give your opinion. And so to the companies who are listening right now, who have the energy of that, right, who don't have the culture that's set up for open communication, who are pushing their people to this ideal something that can't be achieved, to perfectionism where there's shame infused in an organization, where that cuts off the veins of creativity and open communication. What do you recommend to them?
So the first thing is that you need to reject the notion that profit and purpose are at odds. So this
Mhm.
is, as
Well,
somebody said, I quoted in the book, is it's one of the bad memes of the world, and you need to acknowledge that it's true, and they are not mutually exclusive.
right.
These things can live harmoniously, and there are thousands of companies that do it really, really well. Of course, NetHealth is one of those. So that's the first thing. And so if you're cynical, if you're sarcastic about that, it starts with you, and you need to
Yeah.
recognize that this is a possibility. And I mean, the second part of it really is that you don't just focus on what is, but instead change that aperture and focus on what ought to be. And you could be accused of being Pollyannish on that one, but the reality is, if you're stuck looking at what is, you never will imagine what ought to be. And
Yeah.
furthermore, you're not going to fight for it. You're gonna say this is just the way things have been and are going to be, and instead of dreaming of what ought to be. And so that's the third. And then the last part is narrowing your focus to advance products and purposes and ideas that create better realities for people.
Yeah.
If you're not in the business, it doesn't matter whether you're in city revitalization, you work in the church, or whether you work in a not-for-profit or in healthcare or
Yeah.
education. If you're not in the business of creating better products and purposes and ideas that create better realities for people, you're not going to be around long, because
Yeah.
that's the only thing ultimately that really matters, and it's the only thing that resonates.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. All right. Quick speed round. You ready, Patrick?
Sure. Yeah,
All right.
shoot.
You've written a great book, but what's your favorite book and why?
Favorite book would be tough. I reference 40X a decent amount. So the four disciplines of execution. Good book, teaching people the basics of lead and lag measures.
Okay. Good. I love that. Best piece of wisdom you've ever received.
I didn't come this far to come this far.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's one of my favorites. Yeah. Finish this sentence. Someone who needs to grow their company but doesn't have the right culture. They know it. They need to
face the brutal truth and take a first step.
Yeah, I love it. Tell everybody where they can connect with you, buy your book, and learn more and connect with you.
So you can buy the book Refounder anywhere books are sold. So whatever is your favorite outlet on that one. And you can check me out at LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter and also on Instagram.
Great. Patrick, I appreciate you taking time to, talk about your book. It's, it's amazing to me how much knowledge can be put in a book. And, whether you're listening to it over a couple hours or reading it over a couple hours, the amount of knowledge in a book can really change people's lives. And so I appreciate you taking all of your knowledge, your research, and putting it into a book for the world to read. So thanks so much for being on the show. Think community. If you want to buy Patrick's book, check out Refounders on Amazon.com. All right. Thanks, man. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Think community.
Thank you, John. Thanks for what you do.